There is a major report out from American channel NBC that reveals some serious behind-the-scenes tension between Washington and Riyadh. Basically, President Trump announced this massive operation called Project Freedom to break the Iranian blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. But according to this report aired on NBC, the US had to abruptly pause the whole thing because Saudi Arabia and to some extent Kuwait essentially closed their doors. They told the US that they couldn't use their airspace or their bases to carry out these missions. Now, we've seen the strikes, we've seen the blockade, and the tension is, of course, at breaking point. But Riyadh's move here says quite a bit. They were reportedly not happy that President Trump had announced this operation on social media without actually coordinating with them. So for the Saudis, this isn't just a game of tweets. It's of course their backyard, their region, their neighborhood. They are saying to the Americans that you can't just use our land and our skies to escalate a conflict without our consent. So this pushback is exactly why Donald Trump had to pivot and announce a short pause, claiming he's giving diplomacy a chance. But let's look at what's happening on the other side of the fence. While the US was trying to get its planes in the air, the Iranian foreign minister was in China. And get this, while he was sitting there with the Chinese leadership, he picked up the phone and called the Saudi foreign minister. Now, this tells you a lot about the current dynamics. You have the US trying to lead a military charge without the regional players on board. You have Saudi Arabia and Iran talking to each other through China. It shows that Saudi Arabia's voice is now one of the most important ones in this conflict. They aren't just an ally. They are in many ways deciding or playing a major role in how this conflict shapes up. So to analyze the situation as it stands today, which is of course at a very delicate juncture, we are now joined by Mr. Simon Tzourbakis. He is a research associate at the Middle East Institute in Switzerland, and his work focuses on Middle East geopolitics and regional security dynamics. He also tracks the balance of power between Iran, Gulf states, Israel, and the US, which makes his analysis very valuable today. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Tzourbakis.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Mr. Husain. I look forward to our discussion.
All right, so we now understand that the peace proposal is at a very delicate stage where we are waiting for the Iranians to get back to the US via Pakistan about what they think of the proposal. We don't know any details as yet, but what are you hearing? And primarily, what I'm really interested in hearing your views on is what kind of a deal could Iran actually live with?
Mm-hmm. So from what I'm hearing, the proposal, this memorandum that has been, discussed or has been shuffled between the two parties, obviously, as you said, through with the mediator being Pakistan, but also in the background we've got Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia involved. And yeah, it seems that the proposal foresees the respective blockades being lifted, so the Iranian and the US blockades of the Strait of Hormuz, and that Iran would agree to a moratorium on uranium enrichment. There seems to be some disagreement over the length of this moratorium. The US seems to be demanding 20 years. Iran seems to be willing only to agree to 5. And on top of that, the US seems to be ready to unfreeze some frozen Iranian assets. And then as Iran complies with the other conditions, gradually would lift sanctions. And then finally, they would leave talks about other nuclear issues such as the highly enriched uranium. They would leave those discussions to a later date.
So essentially, it all boils down to the nuclear program and the moratorium and the time duration for the moratorium. And of course, we initially heard that Iran was okay with 5 years, and the US wanted 20 years. So that's the spectrum within which negotiations would happen, I suppose.
That seems to be the case, but yeah, obviously, as you know, in the situation, there's reporting, but you know, we're not the fly on the wall, so nobody can know for sure. But I'm from my perspective, my interpretation is that yeah, basically through this moratorium, Iran kind of pushes away the pressure, you know, relieves and allows, you know, Trump maybe to save face, say he has a deal, U.S. President Trump, and then just to push this off, you know, maybe to the next administration, and yeah, kind of allowing the Iranian regime, which has also suffered large losses, to recover and to consolidate, you know, given that there's a new supreme leader. So yeah, it just allows them to relieve the pressure to get, you know, the U.S. concentration of forces in the and around the Strait of Hormuz to withdraw, and just giving some breathing space to the Iranian regime. Also like from the financial perspective, if these funds are being unfrozen, then you know it will allow the Iranian regime to basically restore or reinvest in its drone and missile production, to maybe fund its proxy networks in the region, and yeah, through that step by step rebuild its deterrence. So yeah, it seems to be that would be the main driving factors behind Iran seeming to be willing to agree to this accord.
You know, I've also been covering the story very closely, and my own senses, which are obviously shared by a lot of people, that you know there is constant misreading of Iran by the US. Now, of course, there can be two reasons. One is that the public posturing that we hear, the public rhetoric, or the kind of statements coming from Washington, they may be primarily for their domestic consumption, for their political agendas. But privately, the Americans would know very well the kind of leverage that they have and the leverage that Iran has. Now, if we are to go by what Mr. Trump says, it's, you know, it would look like Iran has no cards at all with them. Whereas in actuality, they may have an upper hand. And if they have the upper hand, then why would they compromise on what they believe is their vital national interest, which is the nuclear program? So flexible to an extent, but not beyond that. So do you think the Americans actually realize that they do not have the upper hand?
I mean, obviously, President Trump is not somebody to, let's say, be very willing or open to this kind of, you know, to perceiving other countries, especially like non-great powers, to give them this kind of, let's say, recognition. And the fact, I mean, I would say when we go to maybe misreading by, you know, the U.S. president, by the cabinet of Iran, then we have to go maybe back to the start of the conflict, where they thought that the decapitation strike of the political leadership would basically be enough for the whole system to crumble. Obviously, this hasn't come to pass. And but yeah, I wouldn't generalize this to let's say, the American, let's say the U.S. In general, because there were many analysts saying that the Iranian regime cannot be this easily toppled. There's been like decades of indoctrination, and that yeah, basically the losses could be compensated. And when it comes to the Iranian regime being willing to agree to something, as I said, with this 5-year moratorium, that push the ball, or let's say basically give them some breathing space, you know, just kicking the ball down the road. Whether they are making major concessions there, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, if they even agree on what we're hearing, that they would officially end the war, and open the Strait of Hormuz, and lift the blockade, the American blockade, and then give themselves 30 days to negotiate all the other issues. So that means we are basically going back to where we were before the war. And if the Americans are agreeing to that, they're essentially in many ways saying that, you know, whatever we've done for the past 2.5 months has actually brought us nothing. And we are starting now from where we were on the 27th of February.
I mean, from the Iranian side, they've now played their card, you know, the Strait of Hormuz. This has often been like, let's say, a latent threat but now they've made it manifest and show how they can affect basically the whole global economy. So they will always be able to go back to this pressure point. And obviously for the Iranians to deploy some speedboats in the Strait of Hormuz can be done way more easily than for the US to deploy a major fleet, a concentration of 3 aircraft carriers in this area. That's a major investment on the other side of the globe, basically for the US. So it would take way more of an effort for the US to reinstate its blockade than for Iran. So basically for them, for Iran, it's very low cost to reinstate it, whereas for the US, they have to pay major political and economic costs. So
exactly, and I think that would probably explain why the Americans are now open to the kind of flexibility that the world was expecting not to see from them. The very fact that now they're willing to discuss all of these proposals, which give them nothing practically right now, is, I think, a huge come down, and they'll have to really find a very inventive way to sell it to as a victory.
Yeah, I mean, the mere fact of getting a deal, whereas previously there wasn't one, obviously the JCPOA, which was agreed or reached by the Obama administration in 2016, in 2015, excuse me, was a deal. Trump kind of villainized it and called it the worst deal ever. But in the decade since then, there has been a deal. So, but Trump reaching a deal, just the mere fact of that allows him something to spin, to spin this way or the other to make it seem like a win. And then, there's always the possibility of going on to the next adventure. We're seeing the concentration of forces now in the Caribbean, so maybe Cuba is going to be the next target. Obviously, maybe a easier challenge than the Iranian regime. So yeah, there's always, distraction and don't, look what I'm doing here, look over here. So yeah, I think the doctors will
an important
make
point.
Their magic.
Exactly, and I'm sure that you've seen the American channel NBC story about how President Trump had to suspend his that Operation Freedom or whatever it was called, where because because the Saudis objected. They weren't consulted. Other Gulf countries were not consulted. As a result of which they disallowed the US to use their bases. Now, if that is indeed true, that means that Saudi Arabia, being the largest, most influential country in the region, is now flexing its muscles and saying enough is enough and this needs to end.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a valid argument. And as you said, the Project Freedom, this naval escort mission launched by the US Navy, CENTCOM, it only lasted for 2 days. And during that time, it didn't convince a lot of ships to pass the strait. So basically, it failed in its declared purpose. And Trump quickly pivoted away from this, stating that due to there being a process or progress in the negotiation, and also due to the urging of Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Chief of Army Staff Asim Munir, who've been very key in this in their mediation efforts. Due to their urging, he has decided to stop the Project Freedom while continuing the blockade.
Very true, and I think we are at a stage where now, through Pakistan, hopefully there will be some positive response from Iran, and we can finally find an exit from this conflict. Mr. Simon Tzourbakis, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your valuable analysis with us.
Thank you so much again for inviting me. Mr. Husain, it was a pleasure to be on the show, and I hope to be back again to discuss any further developments on this.
Thank you.